Hello, everyone, again. My name is Sienna from Dragon Trail Interactive, and I'd like to get started with today's webinar. Thank you very much for everyone for joining us for our first webinar of 2019, and Happy New Year to everyone. I am joined today by Michael Jones from Create Consulting to discuss Chinese tourism trends in 2018 and what we should expect this year.
Hi, everybody.
In our agenda today, we'll start by looking back at 2018 to see the biggest trends for Chinese tourism in general, as well as the major trends for group travel and the most important developments in digital media and marketing. Then we'll look forward to 2019, discussing the biggest growth destinations, as well as the digital and travel developments that we expect to see this year. At the end of the webinar, we'll finish with a Q&A session. We'll also be joined by Dragon Trail's Managing Director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at that point, Roy Graff, who will be on hand to help answer your questions as well. You can ask us questions at any point during the presentation, which we will answer at the end during the Q&A section. But we ask that you please use the Q&A button that you should see on your panel to ask the questions instead of asking them through the chat. If you use the chat, sometimes the questions get lost and it's harder for us to make sure that we've answered them all. So if you could please use the Q&A button, then we can make sure that we get to all of the questions at the end of the presentation. I'd also like to say now that we will be sharing a link where you'll be able to see a recording of the presentation as well as a PDF of all the slides of the presentation with you in the coming days, so you don't have to worry about writing down everything that you see on the slides, and you'll have the presentation to refer to afterwards. So before we get started, just a few introductions to those of us who are speaking today. Many of you will have attended Dragon Trail's webinars in the past, but for those who don't know me, I'm Dragon Trail's communications manager, and I'm responsible for most of the articles and reports that you'll find on our blog, as well as our social media channels. And thank you very much to Michael Jones, who joins us today as a guest speaker from Create Consulting. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, thank you, Sienna. Hi, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Michael Jones. I've been based in Beijing for the last 17 years, working with the Chinese outbound tourism market, particularly in more the traditional PR side and also the B2B trade side. So I really look forward to today's session.
Thank you. So for those who don't know Dragon Trail Interactive, and I assume a lot of you will and have attended the webinars in the past, so just bear with me. We are a digital marketing agency focused entirely on Chinese outbound tourism. We're headquartered in Beijing with offices in Shanghai, Xi'an, as well as international offices in the UK and the US. We're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and we will be holding a special summit in Beijing this May called China, the Future of Travel. You can find out more about that at chinafutureoftravel.com or by visiting the event section of our website, or you can get in touch with us after the presentation today if you might be interested in attending that summit, which will be 2.5 days in the middle to end of May. Dragon Trail has over 80 clients on 6 continents, and we work with a large range of tourism brands, including tourism boards, hotels, airlines, cruise lines, attractions, and other brands.
Hi there, guys. So about Create Consulting. Create Consulting was founded by myself and Eileen Zhang at Beijing 7 years ago. We're now focusing, as I mentioned, mostly on public relations and B2B, dealing with tour operator relations. We have a team of 20 staff spread between Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Chengdu. And yeah, so that's a bit of an introduction about our company. In terms of our clients, we are representing clients from Peru tourism, South Africa tourism, Jordan tourism. Sorry, Sienna, can you click the slide, please?
Sorry, I'm trying to. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yes, so we're working with clients from pretty much all of the continents, excepting for Antarctica. but we deal with clients in Australia, New Zealand, in Asia, the Middle East, like the Jordan tourism, South America with Peru tourism, South Africa tourism in Africa, and also Viking cruises in Europe. Yeah, so that's, I think, a sufficient introduction.
Thank you. So now I'll get started by looking at the most important trends of 2018. A lot of the trends to talk about in 2018 are actually long-term trends that started well before 2018 and will continue afterwards, but which I think really define some of the biggest shifts that we can see in Chinese outbound tourism in 2018. So one of these is the shift from package group tours to independent travel, FIT, or customized travel, which are smaller groups with personalized tours that are created just for them. So right now, actually, most of European, Latin American, and African destinations are still skewed more towards group travel than FIT. However, the trend around the world is definitely moving away from package groups and towards both FIT and customized tours. However, I think it's important to point out a couple of things about this shift, is that just because Chinese are traveling independently, it doesn't mean that they're solo travelers. And Chinese are very likely to travel together with small groups of friends and family. And those who are solo travelers might even meet with other travelers on travel website forums like Chongyou in order to meet up and travel together. Moreover, it's important to note that the rise of FIT does not mean necessarily that these travelers are not using a travel agent or that B2B isn't important anymore. And actually B2B is still really critical, even in many markets where there are a lot of independent Chinese travelers, from places like Canada, which are more established markets, to emerging destinations as well. In terms of new kind of demographic groups that we can see emerging in 2018, women and the 1980s generation are still really leading Chinese outbound travel and travel spending. And these are the kind of the most important demographics to be thinking about with marketing. However, there are a number of other very important demographics that will be more relevant for some destinations and businesses than others. On the note about women travelers, actually, if anything, they're becoming more important, where for a long time now, women have made up more than half of all Chinese outbound tourists. And in 2018, there's been a shift from 2016 to 2018, where in the past, women, although they made up more than half of Chinese outbound tours, they still made up less than half of Chinese independent travelers. But as of 2018, they also make up now, I think, 58% of FITs as well. But some of the other demographics that are important to think about are first younger travelers and families as well. Summer 2018 was very big for students as well as families traveling. And Chinese who were born in the 1990s have now entered the workforce, and even those that were born in the 2000s are becoming increasingly visible in the outbound tourism market. And this has real implications for digital marketing channels that we'll see later. But at the same time as younger travelers and family travelers are very important, we're also seeing the older silver travelers are a very strong and particularly resilient and financially secure demographic, especially for group tourism. And Michael will talk a bit more about that later too. In general, we've seen a shift where Chinese tourists shopping is decreasing, but at the same time, visitor numbers to museums are increasing. In a 2018 survey by the Chinese travel website Chongyou, over 90% of respondents said that they were interested in cultural tourism in Paris, and only 55% said that they wanted to shop. However, it is important to note that Chongyou is a website for independent travelers, and so this may skew the data a little bit as well, and group tourists might be still slightly more interested in things like shopping. But overall, we know that shopping volume is decreasing around the world. So we've also seen a rise in overseas restaurant bookings made on OTAs on Double 11, the Chinese shopping holiday in November. Throughout the year, looking at travel-related WeChat accounts, we have seen that food and flower-related content was especially popular. Travel is definitely seen by a lot of tourists as a social currency in terms of being able to show off your unique experiences on social media. And it's also seen as a form of education for families who may visit universities and museums, or even send their children on overseas study courses as part of the travel experience. And now we'll look at some of the B2B trends that have happened in 2018.
Okay, so from the B2B, from the tour operator side, the travel agents actually continue to be really, really busy individuals. They are constantly, the tour operators today, as was 5 years ago, this hasn't changed. In fact, it's just increasing. The tour operators are just being inundated with new destinations, new travel products. So the point being is, in terms of tour operator relations, these are very busy individuals, and it takes something special to get their attention. For some regions, there's been a swift change from group to FIT travel, as Sienna was pointing out earlier, especially in places like Australia and New Zealand, where there's still FIT continues to grow, and arrivals to Australia and New Zealand continue to grow from China. But from the group side, they're actually decreasing in size. Yeah. And so this is especially effective for short haul and a little bit medium haul destinations. And many of the tour operators have really been caught off guard by this change. It really is happening quite rapidly. Other tour operators have, however, found new opportunities by expanding into new destination markets, especially long-haul destinations like in South America. South America has become really popular for group travel over the last 2 to 3 years. But basically meaning at the end of the day, in terms of tour operator relations, the industry is very much in flux. Things are changing constantly. Some of the big tour operators are going bankrupt, some are decreasing in numbers. So it just means that right now in the tour operator market, things can be quite unpredictable at the moment. Then furthermore, to continue with the trends, there's been a high growth of new destination and products. Short-haul destinations around China, like Japan, Southeast Asia, still remain the top destinations, just in terms of convenience, price, cultural affiliation, things like that. And then niche destinations have seen a lot of diversification in outbound markets. Places like Peru, Brazil becoming very popular, for example, in South America. In Europe, the Eastern European destinations are becoming extremely popular nowadays, a trend that started about 5 years ago already. But yes, so those are the general trends. And then we can also see, like, still talking about Europe, Central and Eastern Europe has really like shot up in 2018 with tremendous growth for those destinations. But also, if you look at the bottom right-hand side box of the slide, you'll also see that in 2018 H1, there was also growth of outbound group packages, not from necessarily the first-tier cities, but absolutely second and third-tier cities in China. So while group travel is a little bit, depending on the destination, of course, in the decline for some markets, that is actually being circumvented by increased group travel from China's leading second and third-tier cities, which is quite promising. Then furthermore, 2018 was also a bit of a challenging year for tour operators. For the 2018 summer season, so June, July, especially around July for the children's school holidays, group sales was very much down 2018 summer compared with 2017, the year before. But the silver lining of that dark cloud is that the post-60s generation, so Basically, we're talking about Chinese consumers who are either close to retiring or pensioners already. They have been really rock solid in their growth to even new destinations. So yes, FIT is becoming very important. Yes, the younger generations are absolutely the targets for now and for the future also. But we're just stressing that one must not ignore the older generations, because they are not as affected by economic downturns. They've got a stable income. So that is really a good group, a good target segment of the markets to be targeting for quite some time. Then furthermore, also from the group travel, there's been a huge increase in niche group travel, especially around things like luxury sea and river cruises, trips to Antarctica, and all these kind of tailor-made products. And these have become extremely powerful in 2018 over 2017. Then just to look at a bit of what happened in the tour operator industry, the B2B travel trends for 2018, look at some of the regions. In Africa, Egypt was continuing to be dominated by Chinese group travel. That's also due to the price sensitivity there that was good for them. Until, unfortunately, recently, Kenya was also doing well. But Morocco was a very, very hot destination for group travel. And a carry on for that was Tunisia. Tunisia also started surging ahead. So North Africa became very popular in 2018 again, especially from the group travel perspective. In South America, that is also really become the hot new destination for group travel. It kind of is the last continent that needs to be discovered by Chinese tourists. So countries like Argentina, Brazil, Peru, they've been receiving increasing amounts of Chinese tourists. But when it comes to South America, because of the distance, because of the expense, because of all the variables at play that make it more challenging, South America still, from a group tourism perspective, remains one of a multi-country itinerary. So normally the packages for South America would contain 4 countries, and those 4 countries would be visited over a period between 12 and 21 days. So the people are prepared to travel quite a significant amount of time. They do as many countries together in one go. And if you think about that amount of time being taken up, that would be normally your consumers that are a little bit older. See the next slide, please. Western Europe has rebounded in 2018, 2017. It certainly had some problems, some challenges, but Western Europe is very much back in 2018. And at the same time, as we mentioned already, Eastern Europe has continued to grow in popularity out of the European sphere. And then finally, in the Middle East, the usual popular destinations like Dubai and Abu Dhabi have continued to remain popular. They're digging deeper. But at the same time, there were quite significant security threats in the Middle East in 2018, and that led to a dampening on sales to many of the other Middle Eastern countries in 2018.
Thank you very much. I think we'll move on now to talk about a few of the major digital trends that we've seen in 2018 that relate to Chinese outbound tourism. One of them is Chinese mobile payments, which have really taken off internationally in the past year. They started to take off internationally in 2017 around the end of the year, and then last year it was just overwhelming the amount of destinations and businesses around the world that had started to accept Alipay and or WeChat Pay. So those are the 2 biggest Chinese mobile payment platforms. There was a huge surge before Chinese New Year last year, but there's really been a lot of steady expansion throughout the year since Chinese New Year as well. And just to give you some more statistics from the ones that you'll see on the screen here, overseas Alipay spending for the October holiday in 2018 was 30% higher than in 2017. And we can see much higher growth than that from certain locations. So for instance, Bicester Village, which is a shopping outlet in the UK, their Alipay spending volume in October 2018 was 90 times what it was in 2017. Continental Europe has seen a very big expansion of Chinese mobile payment acceptance in countries like Germany, Finland, and Norway, but there's also been a lot of growth as well in Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And though they're already an established market for Chinese mobile payments and one of the earlier countries to adopt this, there has been a lot more penetration in Japan as well too, with WeChat Pay partnering up with Japan's line system to make it easier for merchants to be able to accept Chinese mobile payments everywhere. In terms of the big apps of 2018, there are two that are the most relevant for travel and travel marketing that I'd like to discuss. Xiaohongshu, also known as Little Red Book, it actually came out in 2013, and Douyin was first launched in 2016. However, 2018 was the year that both of these apps really took off and became relevant for travel marketing, and we would expect them to continue to grow in 2019 as well. Both of these apps are particularly popular with the 1990s generation. So if you are looking to target this emerging group of Chinese travelers, these are good apps to be looking at. So Xiaohongshu was originally a shopping focused app, and it's become a little bit more lifestyle oriented, and you can find lots of travel experiences on it, especially kind of luxury travel experiences. And it can be used quite effectively as part of your KOL marketing. Douyin, which is also known as TikTok internationally, you can use this in a number of different ways for travel marketing. One of the things you can do is also, like Xiaohongshu, use it as part of your KOL strategy. You can also open your own account on Douyin and start creating your own videos about your destination or brand, put them out there. Or you can sponsor what is called a Douyin challenge, where it's essentially an incentivized hashtag where users will create videos around a certain hashtag, and then the one with the most likes can win a prize. It is important to note, though, that a lot of people may have seen that TikTok is now an app that is available to download internationally, and it started to take off in the Western world as well. Douyin and TikTok are the same company, and they have the same logo, and they have exactly the same kind of interface and functionalities. However, these two apps are different, and what a Chinese person using Douyin will see is different than what an American or British person using TikTok will see. So if you do want to open a Douyin account and make videos about your travel brand that will be seen by Chinese consumers, you would need to do that on the Chinese version of Douyin and get somebody probably in China to help you do that, because if you put the videos on TikTok, those will be available to all of the international users of the app, but they won't necessarily be seen within China. WeChat mini programs are another thing that really took off in 2018. They were launched at the beginning of 2017. And there is quite a lot of hype around WeChat mini programs, and actually a lot of their functions could easily be achieved through an H5 campaign or a mobile site, but they do have a wide variety of applications for travel, and they are very trendy right now. And I can share here some of the different applications that they can have for travel. So starting from the left, they can be used by destinations to create guides. So the Helsinki City Guide, for instance, has, you can see there's a weather forecast, they have an event calendar, they have even a page where you can find out about Chinese speaking tour guides, recommendations for sightseeing, shopping, and restaurants. So it's a quite, and also maps as well. So it's a quite useful tool for Chinese travelers in Helsinki. A lot of hotels have started to launch mini programs this year as well. And these mini programs, such as the one that you can see here from Hilton, aren't necessarily just focused on what kinds of services the hotel provides, but can also help travelers to navigate the neighborhood around the hotel, making them a more attractive and helpful feature for visitors. They can also be used for B2B, for travel destination training. Visit Sweden launched a B2B training program for Chinese travel agents as a mini program at the end of last year, which you can see here, which has kind of updated their previous WeChat-based travel agent training by using this very popular WeChat mini program platform. And then lastly, WeChat mini programs can also be used for much less functional and more marketing oriented purposes. So WeChat mini programs outside of the travel sphere, they're actually very popular for games. So they're not always quite so functional as some of the other examples that we've seen here. And a fun example of that is on the far right here, an example from Finnair. So Finnair was actually the only non-Asian airline in 2018 to get over 100,000 views for a WeChat post. And it was for their post announcing the launch of their mini program. Their mini program uses artificial intelligence to identify the kind of food in a photo you upload. So for instance, they'll be able to tell if the food is dessert or if it's noodles. And then it supposedly pairs the food with a kind of music. There is a link to tell you about the dining options on Finnair, but the mini program in and of itself is more just a fun thing that got people to be involved in the account or to follow the account and download the mini program without it actually being a ticketing service or customer service or anything like that. And now I'll turn over to Michael to talk about some of the B2B marketing shifts that we've seen this year too.
Okay, thank you, Sienna. So with the tour operator relations again, there's been quite a bit of a marketing shift. We found that traditional and online tour operators like the Sea Trips, like the Tourneals, are also starting to partner a lot more strongly with actual destinations to host destination travel knowledge sharing events. So what they could be is they have a venue, they invite their VIP members or their customers that fit a particular profile that is the target audience of that particular destination. And then they bring in these guests and give presentations and share information. It's just basically because of people out of concern for too much information online airing. So these are opportunities for these OTAs and destinations to speak directly to their customers. These events can often also include their key opinion leaders familiar with the destination. And what is also very interesting is with these, it's kind of like B2B and B2C at the same time. What is great about these events is that they often have on-site and follow-up sales on the spot. So what is great about that is that then the destinations can actually see immediately what kind of sales are coming out of such events. So calculating return on investment is actually quite a simple matter then. Further on, we're also seeing for sure continuing digitization of WeChat-based trade engagements, training platforms that are being developed. So just like Sienna was just talking now about other European countries using mini programs for training the trade travel agents, that absolutely is continuing to a large degree.
Great, now we will move forward to talk about 2019 and what we should be prepared for this year. And I'll turn over first to Michael to talk about some of the growth destinations that we expect to see becoming even bigger in 2019.
Great, so well, we feel from especially from the tour operator perspective, so in places like Africa, more of the niche countries are going to continue to grow, like Tanzania. Namibia is incredibly popular amongst Chinese outbound tourists at the moment. South Africa will continue to grow. But at the same time, Egypt is expected to remain stable. I don't think we're going to be seeing the same growth rates that we were seeing for Egypt in the past. It's going to become a lot more stable nowadays. But at the same time, there's a lot more niche countries coming to the fore, such as Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, especially around that area of Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda. Those areas are becoming quite a lot more popular than in the past. So we see a lot of growth potential for them. In Latin America, again, also a long-haul destination. these destinations are mostly going to see increases of Chinese arrivals. All the Latin American destinations that were not aggressive in the Chinese market before have now become quite aggressive. I think pretty much most of the South American destinations are working really strongly in China right now. And that is starting to definitely pay off with them. Also out of these two, just lastly, Africa and Latin America are both surging ahead in terms of luxury tourism from China. With Latin America actually overtaking Africa as a luxury destination spot for the first time in the Chinese market, which is really interesting to see. Go to the next slide. Great. Furthermore, for 2019, and these are all long-term trends, for the Middle East specifically, now that the war in Syria is seemingly coming to an end and things are stabilizing in Iraq, the general region around those troublesome countries are going to for sure pick up with interest from Chinese travelers now. I think the biggest winners in 2019 are going to be countries like Jordan and Israel, where it's going to be a lot more, hopefully, seemingly a lot more peaceful and calm. So those countries will grow quite substantially compared to last year, which was quite challenging. And then in terms of Europe, I think Sienna would like to say a few things about that.
Yes, so as Michael mentioned earlier, there has been a surge in interest in Central and Eastern Europe, and this has not just been with group tourism, but with the FIT market as well. There's been some countries outside of the EU in Eastern Europe that have had they've had visa waiver policies in 2018, and that has made them obviously more popular with Chinese tourists, such as Serbia, which has had tremendous growth since they waived visas for Chinese passport holders. There's also the perception that kind of Central and Eastern Europe is a safe destination, and it's also maybe the next stop for Chinese travelers who have already been to Western Europe and they've already seen France and Italy, and now they want to see a new part of Europe. So there's really a lot of potential in that area. As Michael mentioned earlier, there's also been a growth of interest in European river cruises, and many of these are in Central Europe as well. But in other parts of Europe, there are new flights launching that will increase connectivity and maybe diversify some of the places that Chinese travelers are going to. So for instance, in 2019, the first ever flights, direct flights between China and Norway will be launching, I think in March, between Beijing and Oslo. There have also been a number of new flights, and they continue to add new ones connecting China and Copenhagen. So that's good for the Scandinavian region as well. And there's also rumored to be a new flight connecting China to Madrid this year. So just to talk briefly about some of the other markets that we didn't cover as the major growth destinations for 2019, just to not leave them out. In 2018, although Thailand is still one of the biggest, if not the biggest, recipient of Chinese outbound tourists, numbers to Thailand have dropped since the summer when there was a boating accident that killed nearly 50 Chinese tourists in Thailand. But this means that there are opportunities for other countries in Southeast Asia, and it doesn't mean that Southeast Asia in and of itself is declining as a destination. So countries like Cambodia or Vietnam or Laos maybe might be able to see an uptick if people are no longer going to Thailand in such high numbers as they were before. In New Zealand, 2019 is the year, the Chinese New Zealand Year of Tourism. So we should expect to see some promotions around that. And numbers to New Zealand and Australia have been growing steadily, and we would expect that to continue in 2019. The situation in North America is a bit complicated right now. Both the US and Canada are a little bit uncertain regarding their political situations vis-a-vis China, and it remains to be seen exactly how this will play out in terms of affecting tourism. So it's a little bit too early to say about those right now, but we'll keep an eye on it. So moving on to some of the other trends that we expect to see in 2019. This may be wishful thinking on my part, and there's certainly a long way to go, but hopefully 2019 will be the tipping point, or at least a turning point for Chinese tourists valuing responsibility and sustainability when it comes to outbound tourism. So there is definitely growing consciousness about issues of environmental responsibility and sustainability when traveling. Recently, there was an article about a filmmaker in Shanghai who has been posting videos online about advising tourists about how to treat wildlife and also treat local cultures with respect when traveling abroad. In 2017, Palau pioneered the Responsible Tourism Pledge, and then last year New Zealand launched their own Responsible Tourism Pledge that you're meant to take when you come to the country, promising that you won't do any environmental damage and that you'll act in a responsible way. So at the end of last year, New Zealand put an article about this pledge on their WeChat account, and the comments were extremely positive, with a lot of people saying that of course they would sign up for the pledge and that they really valued the clean environment in New Zealand. On the other hand, some destinations have ways to enforce responsible tourism. So Boracay shut down in 2018 because of environmental degradation, and then has reopened now with extremely strict rules about plastic use, about recycling. And this is a very popular destination for Chinese outbound tourists too. So we would expect now that these rules are being enforced so much that the Chinese tourists to Boracay would be kind of forced into behaving in an environmentally responsible and sustainable way, and then this could have a big impact on their knowledge about these kind of practices and hopefully carry on to other destinations as well. We would expect affluent Chinese to be taking the lead in this kind of eco-tourism or caring about the environment and issues of sustainability. We can already see that affluent Chinese millennials care more about these kinds of issues and about things like organic food and clean environment, so they may really take the lead on this, and hopefully mass tourism will follow suit. And we can also see in the 2018 Chinese International Travel Monitor, which is a yearly study conducted by Hotels.com, that in 2018 there was a 5% year-on-year increase in eco-tours.
Sienna, I'd just like to add, just to add to that, we've also seen clients, for example, we've got a client at Eco Resorts in Sabah, Malaysia, and they've developed developed a resort on conservation principles. So they've got a conservation area, and their target audience majority is absolutely Chinese. So there's more and more like resorts working on these conservation type principles that are starting to target China as their main market. So I think that that's also quite a shift from the past, and they probably do see that this is becoming an issue in China, and that's why they've taken this route.
Thank you. So moving on to digital interaction, for the last couple of years on WeChat, and this is across the board, it's not limited to travel whatsoever, but we've seen that reading rates on articles from official accounts have been dropping. And we have also noticed this, not for all travel accounts, but it is the general trend in travel as well. And so basically, WeChat users are maybe oversaturated with information. There are so many accounts that have opened on WeChat, and they're starting to look for more than just a passive experience. And we would expect more and more kind of interactive style posts or things to generate user-generated content or really get people a bit more involved with the brand in digital marketing. So a few examples of this. From 2018, WeChat articles, actually, they have a voting function, and this has been used by both the New Zealand Tourism Board that had an article where you had to vote for the cutest alpaca, and All Nippon Airways where you voted for your favorite in-flight meal. So that it's a bit of a gimmick, but it gets people more excited to open the article and look at the things and click to make their choice. And so it's something that goes beyond just reading about a destination, but it also accomplishes giving people information and marketing. Games and competitions are very popular on WeChat, and we've seen this especially for cruise lines and airlines in 2018 that have got a lot of attention for giveaways. Also, the Thai Tourism Board was the first tourism board since we started monitoring WeChat accounts for travel at the beginning of 2017 to surpass 100,000 views for an article. And it was an article that they published at the end of last year with a giveaway for a trip for two to Thailand. And so obviously people love free things, especially the opportunity for free international travel. And this entices people to a WeChat account. So an example here is also Air France's Double 11 promotion where you could win tickets to go to Paris. And so obviously that's a great prize that got people involved. The game itself was quite fun, and as you can see, visually appealing. And a function of the game also was to get your friends involved to kind of help you win the prizes. And so that helped Air France to expand the number of people that were following them and involved with the brand. Another thing that I think we should expect to see more of on WeChat is using WeChat as a customer service tool. And this can be through chatbots or through live agents or a combination of the two. And actually Dragon Trail has a program called Kankan Talk, which is an AI-powered platform that enables live agents to make better and personalized recommendations as kind of a concierge service for consumers on WeChat. And if you're interested in learning more about that program, you can get in touch with us after the webinar. Customized travel is definitely on the rise in China. There have been a huge increase on Ctrip's customized tour platform. And so far, this has been mostly aimed at the luxury sector, looking at customized and personalized bespoke tours. But we would expect more demand for this kind of service and kind of democratization. So beyond just the top end and more into the mass market even. This is a trend that is going on around the world and will definitely be big for China as well. So the kind of results of this shift towards customized tours and personalization means that travel brands need to think about creating resources that will help travel agents to put together bespoke packages. And another side of it is using customer data. And so on WeChat, or anywhere really, you could use data from customers' past bookings, from their WeChat OpenID, which will be available to you if they follow your brand on WeChat or interact with you. Data from previous chats that you've had with a client, and then this can all go into making personalized offers and personalized marketing. And also knowing details about a customer, for instance, their preferences at a hotel, to be able to cater to them with these things and then increase customer loyalty. So Ctrip is actually heavily into using customer data at the moment. They collect data not only on bookings, but also anything that somebody has searched for on the Ctrip platform. And then they use this data to make personalized suggestions to help grow the business and also make it easier for consumers. So we've talked about the increasing rise of independent Chinese tourism around the world, and this goes hand in hand with the development of in-destination digital tools that will help to guide these travelers as they travel independently. So there are a lot of options for kind of in-destination digital tools, and mini programs are obviously one of them, but there are many others as well, including apps, audio guides, or Alipay. So most Chinese will have Alipay, the mobile payment platform, on their phone. And as we mentioned earlier, there are more destinations around the world that are starting to accept Alipay. And The Alipay app will also give customers some information about nearby venues that accept Alipay, and they can even send push notifications. For instance, if a customer has purchased something that relates to a venue, then they'll get a push notification recommending the nearby venue. And here you can see an example of the listing for the London Eye on the Alipay app. The London Eye is a venue that accepts Alipay. However, this can be much lower tech as well. So the example here in the middle is a plaque on the wall at a museum in Bath in the UK. And if you scan the QR code, it just opens up a PDF on your phone that has a map with some Chinese language showing you how to get to a few affiliated museums. And so this, at the most basic level, is kind of in-destination digital marketing. But at the same time, something that would be a little bit more developed is if the museum had its own app or a mini program. Maybe they have a written guide or an audio guide available in Mandarin, and you scan a QR code on the wall to be able to access that. So we would expect to see more things like that coming. Another good example to share is Ctrip's Virtual Tour Manager, which is a very different kind of in-destination digital tool. So the Virtual Tour Manager is an automated chat that is also supported by over 8,000 local guides. It has a social component where if you're traveling independently, you can use the Virtual Tour Manager to find other Chinese travelers who are in the same area and ask them questions or even get together with them. It also has shopping and sightseeing tips, and it has an SOS emergency function, which can provide something as big as evacuation services or interpretation for a medical appointment. And so it helps people who are traveling independently to still have the security of being with an organized tour group in this way. And in 2017, Ctrip said that this virtual tour manager was used by 10% of their FITs. Another thing that we can expect in 2019 is more crises that can hit or threaten to hit Chinese outbound tourism. This is a trend that has been going on for a while and has been escalated in 2018. And unfortunately, I don't see it going away in 2019. So in 2017, there was the ban on group travel and cruises to South Korea in response to Korea working with the US on the THAAD missile defense program, and this has really decimated tourism to South Korea. They still are nowhere near back to the pre-2017 numbers that they had. In 2018, in the US, the trade war had impact on Chinese tourism, especially on group tourism. There was a so-called crisis in Sweden where a Chinese family showed up too early for a day early actually for their hotel reservation, and then ended up being escorted out of the hotel by police. And then this escalated into a diplomatic incident, which hasn't necessarily impacted tourism to Sweden, actually. And Sweden did suspend all of their WeChat marketing for a few weeks around the time of the crisis, but they have been publishing again since things calmed down with that, and they've been in the top 20, if not the top 10 accounts for the last couple of months. So it seems like that one maybe didn't have a big impact. A crisis that was totally unpolitical and did have a big impact, though, was the Thailand boating disaster that I mentioned earlier. And now there are a lot of concerns about Chinese tourism to Canada because of the arrest of Huawei's CFO in Canada last month. So basically, as Chinese tourism becomes bigger, the effects of these crises, political or not, will also be bigger. And it can be hard to predict which ones will really have an impact as well. And so sometimes it's important to kind of take a wait and see approach with some of them as well. In the US, for instance, group travel is way down, but FIT has been barely affected in the last year. So another point to make about these kinds of crises is that tourism boards rarely have anything to do with the source of the crisis. The exception of this would be in Thailand, where the Vice Minister of Tourism made a speech following the boating disaster that essentially blamed Chinese tour operators for the disaster, which was a very poor move. But generally, tourism boards are not involved. However, tourism boards still need to be, and other travel brands still need to be prepared for these kinds of crises, as they can really happen anywhere and when you're least expecting them. So it's important to think about a contingency plan and just know that something like this might happen no matter where you are in the world. At the same time, be careful not to cause offense and create a crisis like this. So for example, don't mix up Japanese and Chinese characters in an ad campaign like Dolce & Gabbana recently did. As I mentioned before, for the US, independent travel is definitely less affected by these kinds of crises than group travel is. So it's why it's one of the reasons that it's important to diversify your market and make sure that you're getting independent travelers as well as group travelers or different kinds of demographics as kind of insurance policy. But at the same time, there are steps you can take to kind of minimize the impact of these crises on group tourism that Michael will be able to talk about too.
Yes, so imagine if some kind of crisis emerges on the front page news of the local newspaper about some destination that a family or a group of friends have booked a trip to. The first thing that they're going to do is contact their travel agent and try and cancel their bookings that they have based on however good or bad the information is in the news. We know that the media are extremely good at exaggerating things, so often there are situations where it's really not as bad as people tend to think from reading the media. And that's why we do think it's really important that you do empower your tour operators and your tour operator partners that you have. If you educate your frontline sales staff or the tour operator partners that you're dealing with about how to handle the messaging around that crisis, just like you would do with crisis risk preparations with the media, do the same with the tour operators. You educate your partners, you empower them, and then they will be able to a certain degree, defend your destination. So when the people do phone in complaining and say they would like to cancel, if the information has been somewhat misleading in the media, then your tour operator partner does stand in a position to help rectify that perception and save sales. So it's just a thing of really just being prepared, not only on social media and media, but also with your tour operator relations. If you educate and empower them, they will protect you.
Thank you. Before we move on to the Q&A section, I'd just like to announce our next webinar, which will be happening at the end of February, and it will be all about WeChat. So we'll be looking at the findings of our full 2018 WeChat rankings report that looks at travel brands throughout the year and their performance on WeChat, as well as some of the top themes and trends and strategies that have worked very well in 2018 on WeChat. We'll also be looking at some of the most important recent changes in WeChat's functionalities and the way that Chinese consumers are using the platform. So like today's webinar, it will be held at 2 different times to suit different time zones and schedules, and it is already up on our website so that you can register for it now. There's a link on the screen now, and as I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing a PDF of this presentation with everyone in the coming days, so you'll have access to the link there too. We've got our contact info here at the bottom for me and at the top for Michael if you have any questions that you want to ask us directly, maybe after the webinar. And at this point, we will open up the discussion for the Q&A section. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have Dragon Trail's Managing Director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, Roy Graff, on the line to help answer some of your questions.